Here in Russia, on June 30th, 7:14 a.m., the sky is cloudless, the air is hot, and there is a soft breeze flowing across the landscape. But something strange is about to happen. Here are the first-hand accounts. Yesterday, while in the yard, I heard from the northeastern side of the horizon a loud noise or a rumble, like thunder. It lasted about 2 minutes. During this hum, the air came in a concussion, as if from the wind. The sky was cloudless. The sun was shining brightly. I began to observe the hanging objects, but they were calm. From this, it can be seen that there were no earthquakes during the rumble. The population of the city and the surrounding villages were surprised. At about 8 a.m., I sat on a bench near the gate, and at that moment there was such a thunderbolt that the windows were rattling in the house. In the house, the family slept. An unusual atmospheric event was observed. At 7:43, the noise akin to a strong wind was heard. Immediately afterward, a horrific thump sounded, followed by an earthquake that literally shook the buildings as if they were hit by a large log or a heavy rock. In the summer of 1908, early in the morning at 6 a.m. local time, I left my room. At that moment, a loud blow was heard in the eastern direction, like a shot from a cannon, accompanied by 2 or 3 quieter blows and a prolonged hum. The sounds were so strong that many people, disturbed, left the premises. A shot from guns was heard from the southeast. At that time, fire was visible. In one house, the glass in the window was knocked out from the air, and standing pots flew out of the furnace. The inhabitants of the village Kazemsky said that during this phenomenon, in the place of their wandering, a strip of forest was blown out by a strong pressure of air, and several deer were killed. The peasants saw, to the northwest, rather high above the horizon, some strangely bright, bluish-white heavenly body, which for 10 minutes moved downwards. The bright body seemed to smudge, and then turned into a giant billow of black smoke, and a loud knocking was heard, as if large stones were falling, or artillery was fired. All buildings shook. At the same time, the cloud began emitting flames of uncertain shapes. All villagers were stricken with panic and took to the streets. Women cried, thinking it was the end of the world. According to the recall of Tunguska, the heavenly body was accompanied by an extraordinary air perpetuation, which caused a terrible forest windbreak over a large area. Eyewitnesses closer to the blast reported that the source of the sound moved from the east to the north of them. The sounds were accompanied by a shock wave that knocked people off their feet and broke windows hundreds of kilometers away. The fire pillar was seen by many, and its shape in the form of a spear is also known. I could not ascertain when the glass was shaking in houses, during strokes, before or after them. The strongest blows were the last, and the concussion of hot air was strong. The peasants of this village were so overwhelmed by the blows that they sent a deputation to the local archpriest to ask if the hot to prepare. They drove the land for the highway on horseback, but there were about 20 workers and several horses. From the thunder, some horses fell, but others stood on their feet. At 5 o'clock in the morning, he sat at the helm of the boat. His impressions were as follows. In the north, a bluish light flashed, and a fiery body was seen much larger than the sun, leaving a wide, light strip. Then such cannonade broke out that all the workers who were in the boat rushed to hide in a cabin. The first blows were weaker, and then everything intensified. The first gold miner said that in the morning when he went to work, he saw something flash, but so much that all the workers paid attention to it. The second one remembers that it was 6 o'clock in the morning. He saw the shine, after which the doors in the room opened and the cupboards shook, as if from an earthquake. All this was accompanied by a hum. He thought this was some kind of explosion. There was an ominous silence in the air. It was felt that some extraordinary phenomenon was taking place in nature. On the island opposite the village, horses and cows began to scream and run from end to end. The impression was that the earth was about to open up and everything would fall into the abyss. Terrible blows were heard from somewhere, shaking the air, and the invisibility of the source inspired some kind of superstitious fear. We had a hut by the river with my brother Chekaren. We were sleeping. Suddenly, we both woke up at the same time. Somebody shoved us. We heard whistling and felt strong wind. Chekaren said, "Can you hear all those birds flying overhead?" I couldn't see what was going on outside. Suddenly, I got shoved again, this time so hard I fell into the fire. I got scared. Jacqueline got scared too. We started crying out for father, mother, brother, but no one answered. There was noise beyond the hut. We could hear trees falling down. Jacqueline and I got out of our sleeping bags and wanted to run away. But then the thunder struck. This was the first thunder. The earth began to move and rock. The wind hit our hut and knocked it over. My body was pushed down by sticks, but my head was in the clear. Then I saw a wonder. Trees were falling. The branches were on fire. It became mighty bright. How can I say this? As if there was a second sun. My eyes were hurting. I even closed them. It was like what the Russians call lightning, and immediately there was a loud thunderclap. This was the second thunder. The morning was sunny. There were no clouds. Our sun was shining brightly as usual. And suddenly there came a second one. Jacqueline and I had some difficulty getting out from under the remains of our hut. Then we saw that above there was another flash, and loud thunder came. Wind came again, knocked us off our feet, and struck the fallen trees. 7:17 local time. Evenki natives and Russian settlers in the hills northwest of Lake Baikal observed a bluish light, nearly as bright as the sun, moving across the sky and leaving a thin trail. Closer to the horizon there was a flash, producing a billowing cloud, followed by a pillar of fire that cast a red light on the landscape. The pillar split in two and faded, turning to black. I saw that, directly to the north, over Unkul's Tunguska Road, the sky split in two and fire appeared high and wide over the forest. The split in the sky grew larger, and the entire northern side was covered with fire. At that moment it became so hot that I couldn't bear it, as if my shirt was on fire. From the northern side, where the fire was, came strong heat. I wanted to tear off my shirt and throw it down. But then the sky shut closed, and a strong thump sounded, and I was thrown a few meters. I lost my senses for a moment, but then my wife ran out and led me to the house. After that, such noise came, as if rocks were falling or cannons were firing. The earth shook, and when I was on the ground, I pressed my head down, fearing rocks would smash it. When the sky opened up, hot wind raced between the houses, like from cannons, which left traces in the ground like pathways, and it damaged some crops. Later we saw that many windows were shattered. And in the barn a part of the iron log snapped. This is the final and most gruesome first-hand account of them all. Viewer discretion is advised. There are 3 of us in the tent, me and my husband Ivan, and old man Vasily. Suddenly, someone pushed hard on our tent. I got scared, screamed, woke Ivan up. We began to crawl out of the sleeping bag. We see Vasily out too. No sooner had Ivan and I got out and onto our feet when someone pushed our tents again and we all fell on the ground. Old man Vasily fell on us. Noise was heard all around. Suddenly it became very light. A bright sun was shining on us, and a strong wind was blowing. Then someone fired hard, as if ice had burst in winter. I was completely frightened and lost consciousness. I can see the tornado dancing. I crawled out from under the poles and cried. The chest with dishes was thrown out of the tent, and it was lying far away, opened, and many cups were broken. I look at our forest, and I do not see it. Many trees stand without twigs, without leaves. There are many trees on the ground. Dry trees, twigs, and deer moss burn on the ground. I looked at some clothes on fire, came up and saw our hair blanket and our fur sack in which Ivan and I slept. I went to look for Ivan and the old man. I saw something hanging on a knot of bare larch. I came up, held out a stick, and took it off. It was our fur, which used to hang on the poles of the tent. The fox skins were burnt. The ermine became yellowish and dirty, covered in soot. Many of the skins of the buns are wrinkled and dry. I took the furs, cried, and went to look for my men. And on the ground the dry forest is still burning and burning. The deer moss is burning. The smoke is all around. Suddenly I hear someone moaning softly. I ran to the voice and saw Ivan. He lay on the ground between the branches of a large tree. His arm broke on a log. A bone broke through his shirt and stuck out. Blood dried on it. Then I fell and lost consciousness again. But soon I woke up. Ivan woke up, began to moan louder and cry. The explosion registered at seismic stations across Eurasia, and airwaves from the blast were detected in Germany, Denmark, Croatia, and the United Kingdom, and as far away as Batavia, Dutch East Indies, and Washington, D.C. It is estimated that in some places the resulting shockwave was equivalent to an earthquake measuring 5 on the Richter magnitude scale. Over the next few days, night skies in Asia and Europe were aglow. There are contemporaneous reports of brightly lit photographs being successfully taken at midnight, without the aid of flash bulbs, in Sweden and Scotland. It had been theorized that this sustained glowing effect was due to light passing through in high-altitude ice particles that had formed at extremely low temperatures as the result of the explosion, a phenomenon that decades later was reproduced by space shuttles. The Tunguska blast was estimated to be the largest explosion to ever take place in human history on Earth. The shockwave from the blast traveled around the world twice. If you hadn't guessed already, it was a meteor. Subscribe because I spent 4 weeks on this. You can find all of the links in the description. You can watch my new second best video here. Goodbye.